All right, let's start this up now.
Xcode.
Going into Xcode.
Tutorial 6. Project.
So we got tutorial 6, and inside, the first class we're going to look at is the assets.swift.
Assets.xcassettes folder. Main menu.xib. Assets.swift. Audio. Assets.swift. Swift source. Move focus to editor ellipses.
So just like all in all the previous tutorials, the assets is where we actually have all of our static components or elements. That's usually the resources and sound files in this case. So we're going to run through it.
//assets ///// new line. Import scene kit.
So we import scene kit, obviously because we need some scene kit objects as well as AV foundation.
Import AV foundation. New line. Let data path equals quote backslash left parent NS home directory.
So data path is the NS home directory. And then in this project, what we do is we go into the music folder in our home folder, and we put a new folder called tutorial 6. That's where all of the assets will be. Because it's the current project actually pulls out automatically all of the subfolders within specific folders for certain types of sounds. And if you want to play around, what you could do, for instance, you can go into the laughter folder. So I'll show you right now.
Audio hide finder. Finder. Man 15. Home. List one item.
So
shared. Osiris. Desktop.
So that's my home folder. I'll go to the music
Movies.
folder.
Music. Audio hijack. Tutorial 6.
Tutorial 6.
Bar.
And so inside, there'll be the bar folder.
Claps. Cut. Clap bar.
The bar folder is mainly where all the tinking sounds, glass sounds, glasses being placed on the table, being picked up, and so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of files inside.
List one item select. Select all. 30 items selected.
So there are 30 different types of sounds. So that's really to give you this immersive randomness so that you never really hear the same thing.
List one item. Claps.
Claps, that's pretty self-explanatory. There's a whole set of clapping sounds which get generated automatically.
Cocktail.
Cocktail is the sounds at the actual cocktail bar. So these kind of appear randomly, a bit less randomly than the tinking sounds because, although the bar is busy, you don't want like someone shaking the cocktail all the time. And so you need to vary them, as much as possible in order for the experience to be quite immersive.
Comics.
Comics is the folder which has subfolders, and if you want to try out at bringing out your own jokes, this is how the structure goes.
List one item.
So first you'll have the name of the comic.
Jake. Boo.
So here you got Boo and Jake. I'll go into the Boo folder.
List one item. Joke. Intro.
So you got the intro, outro, jokes, and movements. So intro.
Joke. Intro. List one item select. Intro 2 and intro 1 underline. Cut.mp3. Quick look. Progress
What's up,
indicator.
everyone? My name's Jake Dean, and welcome to Blind Comedy Night at Blind Comedy Club.
Intro.
So this is one of the intros. There's several of them, and it just picks them out randomly.
List one. Jokes.
Jokes. The jokes actually go sequentially. So you can put as many jokes as you want, and every time a joke is said or right before it's finished, to give you that impression that people actually have understood the joke before it's actually ended, people start clapping or laughing.
Move.
Move is the actual sound made when the comic goes on stage. So in our case, we've got like a wheelchair, a comic on a wheelchair, and we've got a blind comic. So one uses a cane, the other one, you can hear the sound of the wheelchair.
Outro.
So outro, again, that's like the last bit when the comic says, okay, thank you very much for your time, goodbye, and see you next time. That's pretty much it.
List one item select. List one item.
So you can put as many comics as you want, and it will just keep cycling through them, one after the other. So imagine you can pretty much put 1,000,000 comics inside, and it will take forever to actually even go to the first comic again, which is kind of cool.
Crowd.
Crowd this is where you have just some ambient sounds to give a bit more texture into the bar atmosphere. And those are just kind of...
List one. Crowd2.mp3. Crowd1.mp.
Those are lengthy MP3 files, and it's just ambient sounds of kind of people talking and doing things.
List one. Laughters.
You don't have to put as many of them, but if you want, if you put a lot of them, then you can actually emulate a very, very large audience.
Crowd. Laughters.
Laughters, now that's a folder with a subfolder.
List 1.
And this is where you got each folder.
Man 2, Man 1, Man 2, Man 3, Man 5, Man 6, Man 7.
Those are all of the different men and women, and each folder has a certain amount of laughter types. And the more laughters you actually put, the better it is, because you'll be less likely to actually hear the same laughter.
List 1. Mic.
The mic is just when the comic arrives on stage and tests out the mic, when they're just kind of bumping on the mic like this.
Laughters.
That's pretty much it for all of the assets. So we go back to Xcode.
Xcode. var URL colon URL.
So the URL.
var intros equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
So the
var intros equals
is an array itself, but it's an array of arrays. It's a 2D array. Why? Because each comic has its set of intros, and each comic has an index. That means like a way to pull it out from the array, and each of them will be assigned an index so that you know exactly where to go. And the array is one of the more efficient ways of actually storing the information, specifically if you have an index of it, because your computational time is constant, or 1. Instead of actually looking and searching through the name of the comic, which has a worst case scenario of n squared or n log n, which is very bad for computation, especially when you want to do something dynamic.
var outros equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
So the outro is the same thing, is a 2-dimensional array of SCN audio sources.
var comics equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
Comics is so pretty much where the jokes will be. So you have intro, outro, comics.
var comic indices equals left bracket left parent underline joke count colon int underline intro count colon int underline outro count colon int right parent right bracket left parent right parent. var comic indices equals.
So the comic indices is an array of a tuple. Most of you probably do know what a tuple is, but for those who don't, a tuple is just a data structure, which is within parentheses and separated by commas, of different object types. You can put like a mix of different objects inside, but in my case, what I'm doing is I'm putting the count indices of the number of jokes, the number of intros, and the number of outros. So instead of actually calling out the length method of an array, which still takes time, to gather the information, I immediately put them in while I'm actually loading the files. That way I can extract them much faster.
Underline outro count colon int right parent right bracket left parent right parent.
And I've given them some labels: intro count, joke count, and outro count. That will be useful later because we won't be referring to them by index number, but by their actual label.
var joke times equals left bracket flow 64 right bracket left parent right parent.
Joke times now is structured as a 2-dimensional array as well, but the joke time is a way to, once we've loaded the source, to actually calculate the number of seconds it actually is. And that is useful to understand how long the joke has been going for, and then to be able to compare it with the total length of the current simulation. And once we compare it, what we can do is we can figure out how much right before the joke we want the laughters to start. Because if we mechanically have laughter starting after the sound is finished, it seems as though people have not captured the joke, or they haven't understood. We don't want a dumb crowd.
var comic names equals left bracket string right bracket left parent right parent.
Comic names, this is kind of for convenience to see what kind of comic we're on right now. And that would just be strings, an array of strings.
var laughters equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
Now for the laughters, it's again a 2-dimensional array, and that would be the index of all of the folders which have been taken from the laughters folder, and they all have a certain amount of SCN audio source files. Again, we can pull them out very quickly because we'll already have the indices for both the person laughing, and the randomizer will pick out from an index.
var laughter indices equals left bracket and right bracket left parent right parent.
Laughter indices is associated to the laughters, and that allows us to actually pick out the actual person or say guest inside once we actually want to associate an audio player to that node.
Var bar sounds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
So the bar sounds, that's just a one-dimensional array because all the bar sounds will be globally, going all over the place.
Var bar count equals 0.
Bar count, so that's just the count of the number of SCN audio sources in there, again, to make it faster.
Var clap sounds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left.
Clap sound goes through the same thing.
Var clap count equals 0.
Clap count.
Var move sounds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
The move sound is a two-dimensional array because it has different types of comics with different types of sounds and the way they actually move towards the stage.
Var move count equals left bracket left parent right parent.
The move count is so the number of source files for each of the comics.
Var move speed equals left bracket 0.6 1.2 right bracket.
So the move speed is something which we're going to use as a delta for the movement every time the frame refreshes. Delta is basically a distance which is given times speed. So it's kind of you would have the distance is equals the speed times the time elapsed. That's pretty much how in physics we have distance. That's how we calculate it. And you can actually proportionally find the two other ones. So if you want the speed, it's distance over time, so on. So that's basic mathematics.
Var mic sounds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent.
The mic sounds is just, an array of SCN audio sources. We just pick out randomly like one of those mic tapping sounds.
Var mic count equals 0.
And the mic count, again, to facilitate the access to that object.
Var cocktail sounds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent.
Same thing with the cocktail sounds.
Var cocktail count equals var crowds equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent.
And the crowds.
New line. Func load sources left parent.
So the first function is the load source that will happen at the beginning when we load up the view controller. Its signature has no arguments and it does not return anything.
New line. Func load sources left parent left brace.
Okay, now this is kind of like the beef, let's say. The beef, the peanuts, the butter, all of that, of the process of loading all the assets.
Let directory equals foundation.url left parent file URL with path : quote / left parent data path right parent comics quote right parent.
So the data path, as you remember, we've assigned it as being the NS home URL, so the home directory /music/tutorial6. So we already have the data path variable, and we'll put it inside the string literal as a variable. And then after that, we put comics, because now we're going to retrieve the comics first.
Let directory equals foundation.url left parent file URL.
So we'll assign the directory variable to it.
Do left brace.
And we do so try catch block, just in case we can't find the directory for debugging purposes, and it's good practice.
Print left parent quote comics directory is : / left parent directory dot path right parent quote right parent.
So here, just on the you can see on the console which directory in.
Left folders equals try file manager dot default.
So folders equals file manager dot default.
Contents of directory left parent path : directory dot path right parent.
So the contents of the directory, and that usually comes up with an array of different files. Now, a lot of systems have a .ds underline store. Most of the times it's okay because a ds underline store is a hidden file. If it can't find anything, it'll just pass on to the next file.
For comic in folders, left brace.
Now, for comic in folders, so for each object inside folders.
Var audio files : left bracket SCN audio source right bracket.
Now, audio files.
Var audio file count : int.
And audio file count int. We just kind of already start declaring them so that we are within the try block. And within the try block, what we're going to do, we're actually going to generate the arrays and the int.
Var audio files : left bracket SCN audio source right bracket. Var audio file count : int. If comic dot contains left parent quote underline quote right parent left brace.
So if comic dot contains dot underline, and that's just the ds underline store files. But what I did is I negated it. That means if it does not contain dot underline, then it's okay to go forward.
Comic names dot append left parent comic right parent.
Comic names dot append comic. So we've already got the name of the comic.
Left sources equals foundation.url.
So sources.
Left parent file URL with path : quote / left parent data path right parent comic / left parent comic right parent / jokes quote right parent.
right? So the first thing we want to do is retrieve the jokes. So again, we create a URL with the data path and then the name of the comic /jokes. That is going to be the path.
Audio files equals get sources left parent URL colon sources dot path. 18.0 true right parent. Audio files equals get sources left parent URL colon sources dot path. 18.0 true right parent.
Okay, so this is a helper method that I've created. We'll come to it in a bit. But generally, what I'm doing with that function is returning the list of all of the available SCN audio sources and already configuring them so that they loop or are positional and so on. It's much better to go this way so that I don't have to repeat code.
Audio files equals get sources left parent URL colon sources dot path. 18.0 true right parent.
And the two other arguments is that the second one is a volume you want to assign to it. And then you say whether it's a comic or not at the end. But I'll explain this when it comes.
Audio file count equals left parent audio files dot count dash 1 right parent.
So audio files equals audio file dot count -1. Now, the reason why -1, if you don't know, it's because of the length of the array. The length of the array does not necessarily mean that its index is going to be starting at 1. It actually starts at 0. That's why we -1, so that when we try to pick out the actual index, we've already counted the fact that an array shifts the count of the array once, so that the first element is 0.
Right brace else left brace. Continue.
Right.
Right brace audio file 18.0 audio files equal 18 right brace else left brace.
Otherwise, so if it does have dot underline, which is the dstore file, then we just continue through the loop.
Continue. Right brace. Let intro sources equals foundation.url.
And now we're going to do the same process with the intro sources, outro sources, and moves of each of the comics within the block of the folders which have to do with the comics.
Left parent file URL with path colon quote backslash left parent data path right parent comic slash backslash left parent comic right parent slash intro quote right parent.
Right, this time at the end, instead of /jokes, we're going through intro and we go through the same process.
Let intro equals get sources left parent URL colon intro sources 15.0 right parent.
And here I've changed a few other things.
Let intro count equals left parent intro dot count dash 1 right parent.
And I do the same thing, so I get the intro count and -1, and do the same thing with the outro.
Space. Let outro sources equals found left parent file left parent comic right. Let outro equals get sources left parent URL 15.0. Let outro count equals left parent space. Let move sources equals foundation.url.
And I also do the same thing with the move.
Left parent file URL with path colon quote backslash left parent data path right left parent comic right.
Making sure that I've actually changed the data path at the end.
Let moves equals get sources left parent 3.0 right. Let moves count equals left parent moves dot count dash 1 right parent.
Okay.
New line. Comics dot append left parent audio files right parent.
Now, comics.append audio files, if you remember, it's a 2D, two-dimensional array. So I start to append the first comic as the first array in the array, which is the comics array, and I do the same thing with the intro, outro. And the move does not require it.
Intros dot append left parent intro.
The move actually does require it. Sorry about that.
Outros dot append left parent outro right parent. Move sounds dot append left parent moves right parent. Move count dot append left parent moves count right parent. Space. Comic indices dot append left parent audio file count. Intro count, outro count right parent.
And in the comic indices, the tuple will be the intro, joke count, and outro count. So these tuples will be useful later down the track.
Right brace. New line.
Now this block is done. That means we went through all of the comics, and now we're going to take all of the sounds which have to do with the ambience, the claps, the clinking sound, the cocktail sounds, and the crowd sound.
/ load bar sounds.
So now load bar sounds.
Let bar directory equals foundation.url left parent file URL with path.
And I do the same thing with the bar directory.
Quote backslash left parent data path right parent bar quote right parent.
But this time I start from the data path root and then go to bar instead of comics.
Bar sounds equals get sources left parent URL colon bar directory dot path right parent. Bar count equals bar sounds dot count dash 1. Space / load clapping sounds. Let clap directory equals foundation.url left parent file URL with path colon. Quote backslash left parent data path right parent claps quote right parent. Clap sounds equals get sources left parent URL colon clap directory dot path. 2.0 right parent. Clap count equals clap sounds dot count new line.
So I've set different volumes for each of these, so that this is pretty much tweaking. We can spend hours and hours like doing that kind of thing. We can even associate interface outlets, interface elements, so that we can, while the simulation goes on, actually change these properties to see how they feel dynamically. We'll probably go through a podcast like that to make things a bit easier, but for now, we'll stay in the hard-coded style of tweaking.
/ load mic sounds. Let mic directory equals foundation.url left quote backslash left parent data path right parent mic quote right parent. Mic sounds equals get sources left parent URL 30.0 right parent. Mic count equals mic sounds dot count dash 1.
The mic sounds are pretty high. because, like when the comic is actually touching the mic, we actually have amps and speakers, inside the comic show. Usually that's how I can hear that when someone actually touches the mic. So that's why we have a quite elevated volume.
/ load cocktail sounds.
We load the cocktail sounds.
Let cocktail directory equals foundation.url. Left parent file cocktail sounds equals get sources. Left parent URL colon. Cocktail direct path 2.0 right parent. Cocktail count equals cocktail sounds new line. / load crowd ambience files.
Now the load the crowd ambience files.
Crowd directory equals foundation.url left parent data path right parent crowd quote right parent. Crowds equals get sources left parent URL colon. Crowd directory space / load laughing sounds.
Now we're going to get to the laughing sounds, and that's kind of the same process as the comics, except that we're going to go through all of the different men and women, and they will all go through the two-dimensional array.
Laugh directory equals foundation.url left parent file URL with path colon quote / left parent data path right parent laughters quote right parent.
So data path / music / tutorial 6 / laughters.
Let laughter folders equals try file manager.default.
And this one is the laughter folders, so we're going to get the content of the directory at that path.
Contents of directory left parent at path colon. Laugh directory.path right parent. For folder and laughter folders left brace.
And now we iterate through all of the different folders.
If folder dot contains left parent quote underline quote right parent left brace.
Now we do a check again that it's not a dot underline. Yep.
Let laugh folder equals quote / left parent laugh directory.path right parent / left parent folder right parent quote.
Now we take the laugh directory and then we edit the folder. So we append the folder at the end in the string literal.
Let laugh folder equals quote / left parent laugh directory.path right parent / left parent folder right parent quote.
So laugh directory.path, because laugh directory is a URL object.
Let sources equals get sources left parent URL colon laugh folder right parent.
Now we get all of the sources for that specific folder, and
let source count equals sources.count -1.
We get the count.
Laughers.append left parent sources right parent.
And we append this array of SCN audio sources and the laughters to the two-dimensional array.
Laughter indices.append left parent source count right parent.
And then in the same thing with the laughter indices.
Right brace else left brace. Continue. Right brace. Right brace. Right brace catch. Print left parent quote no such directory quote right parent.
And now we get a catch statement.
Right brace. Right brace. New line.
For all of these try statements. What's pretty good is that we can actually get, put the entire block of try statements within a try catch block. Or you can do each individual ones. I mean, it really depends on preferences. I do prefer to do this because logically in my mind, I would think, okay, all right, this might be the problem or that might be the problem. Some people prefer to go through each and every try catch block as its individual try catch, but that really, really increases the code, and it becomes very hard to navigate, specifically if you're inside a function, because if you fold or unfold a function, you can't fold or unfold blocks within a function, but the function itself. But this is really preference again.
Func get sources left parent URL colon string underline volume colon float equals 2.0 underline comic colon bool equals false right parent dash greater left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left brace.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of go through the signature for this one.
Func get sources left parent URL.
So func get sources URL, it's a string, and then volume. And what's nifty with the arguments is that you can have a volume, so you say what the label is, and the underline means that you don't necessarily have to type it down when you call that function. And the volume, which is a float, can have a default assignment to it. So that means if you don't put any argument for that, if you don't put anything for that specific argument, it would default. And that means you don't have to put any arguments, but it will default to a specific value. And then the third one is to say whether it is comic, boolean, and by default we say that it's false. And then it returns an array of SN audio source.
Comic colon bool equals false right parent dash greater left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left brace.
Okay, now we're going to start the function.
Var sources equals left bracket SCN audio source right bracket left parent right parent.
So sources equals an empty array of SCN audio source objects.
Var times equals left bracket float 64 right bracket left parent right parent.
Times is something we declared just in case that the what we're trying to extract is comic joke files.
Do left brace.
Now we're going to do a try catch block.
Let audio files equals try file manager dot default. Contents of directory left parent at path colon URL right parent.
So the contents of the directory of the string that we've given, that means the folder for whatever we're actually taking out, usually will be at the last folder, and inside we'll try to find all the SCN audio source files.
For file and audio files, left brace.
So for file and audio files, we're going to actually iterate for each and every one of them.
Left path equals foundation.url left parent file URL with path colon, quote backslash. Left parent URL right parent slash backslash left parent file right parent quote right parent.
There you go, URL in the file. This time it's not a folder because we know that there will only be files inside, and whatever they're going to be, whether it's MP3, AIF, whatever, we can just load them up as is. We don't have to specify what kind of sound file it's going to be.
If comic left brace.
This is called abstraction to the max.
If comic left brace.
If it's a comic, that means the argument we had in the signature of this function. If it's a comic, then we also need timing information of that source file.
Left time equals AV URL asset left parent URL colon, path right parent.
So it's the actual class to call that is the AV URL asset.
Left duration equals CM time get seconds left parent time. Duration right parent.
So here.
Left duration equals CM time get seconds left parent time. Duration right parent.
All right. So CM.
Left duration equals CM time get seconds left parent time.
CM time get seconds. That's core media, which actually returns a float 64, which is the exact amount of seconds. Very, very detailed because most of the times, like, the sample rate can be like 44.1 kilohertz, which is 44,100 different floating point values per second, which is very, very large. That's why the floating point number for the seconds has to be quite large as well. It's got to, in fact, it's got to be a double, so that you are very, very precise with the analysis, let's say, of your source file, which is a WAV file.
Duration right parent. Times dot append left parent duration right parent.
And so if it is a source file which is associated to comic, then we'll put it inside times.
Right brace. Left source equals SCN audio source left parent URL colon, path right parent.
And then now we create an SCN audio source.
Source.loops equals false.
And then source.loops equals false.
Source.dispositional equals true. Source.volume equals volume.
So make it positional, and the volume is whatever volume was set, or the one by default, and the signature of the function.
/ source.load left parent right parent.
And here I've uncommented source.load. If you want to load it up first, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It really depends on how fast your computer is in, and maybe you can analyze, if actually it bogs down your computer. In my case, I've got a MacBook Pro 15-inch from late 2013, so beginning of 2014. It works fine without preloading the files.
Sources.append left parent source right parent.
And now sources.append the source, and then we return it.
Right brace. If comic left brace.
If it's a comic,
joke times.append left parent times right parent.
Joke times.append, right?
Right brace. Right brace catch left brace. Print left parent quote directory not found quote right parent.
Okay, so that's the catch.
Right brace. Return sources.
And now we return the sources.
Right brace. New line.
Okay, now all the loading functions and components are done here. The next function we're going to use is a randomizer. I'm doing this because it's very hard to write arg4 random underline uniform and then inside UI into32 and then inside whatever value you want to randomize. So I've created a function specifically for that.
Func randomize left parent underline value colon int right parent dash reiterant left brace.
So func randomize underline value, so we don't have to type the label value, which is an int, and then it returns an int. And with it inside, we'll use the arg4 random underline uniform function.
Return in left parent arg4 random underline uniform left parent UI anti32 left parent value right parent right parent right parent.
And we have to make sure that we are returning an int because the arg4 random actually returns a UI into 32. So we coerce it into int and then return that immediately.
Right brace. New line. Func delay left parent under new line.
Now this is pretty much it. I've also created another function which is quite convenient, which is func delay. It dispatches basically a monitoring of a timer clock, and then whatever
func delay left parent underline delay colon double closure colon escaping left.
So here
func delay left underline space d delay colon.
So delay, which is the label,
space double,
and it's a double
comma space closure colon.
So closure, maybe I'll just quickly gloss through this. A closure is basically something that happens when the function has completed. And so it would be called a completion code It's a weird way to write it, but once you actually get the hang of it, you'll be able to understand better what a function closure does. A function itself is a closure because it actually returns something. But then a function closure within a function allows you to pick out the return values from within the function and then have a different function which closes that function. So you can nest closures within functions, which kind of gives you this serial or sequential order of doing operations and processes.
Escaping. Closure colon add. E. S. Escaping.
So add escaping is an Objective-C specific keyword.
Greater. Greater.
And
Dash.
that's pretty much to say, well, add escaping, meaning that it will actually, once there's the function finishes, then it's going to escape, which means it's going to return.
Dash. Greater. Left. Right parent. Right parent. Space.
Now we have dash greater left parent right parent, which means it returns a void.
Left brace.
Okay, and now we start the function.
Dispatch queue.main.async after deadline. Dispatch time.
So here, dispatch queue.main.
Dispatch queue.main.async after deadline. Dispatch time.
Dispatch queues are basically threading. So what you do, you call a different thread from the main thread, and then you create an asynchronous kind of monitoring of the clock starting at a certain point, and then you want it to complete a certain amount of code once that clock is the same value as the value we have placed inside the argument of the function.
Dispatch queue.main.async after deadline. Dispatch time.
After deadline, dispatch time.
Now left parent right parent plus double left parent int.
Now plus, so dispatch time, which means that we take the clock time right at that moment, and then we added the double value.
Now left parent right parent plus double left parent int 64 left parent delays are double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent slash double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent execute colon closure right parent.
And then we execute the closure there.
Right brace. New line. Right double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent execute colon closure right parent. Okay. Now left parent right parent plus double left parent int 64 left parent delays are double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent slash double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent execute colon closure right parent.
So these, what we're doing is we're taking the double and we're multiplying it into the format which can be understood by the dispatch, and then afterwards dividing that at the end by basically another portion of the timer in order for us to actually get the right timing of the delay.
Double left parent and SEC underline PR underline SEC right parent execute colon closure right parent.
And then at the end, what we do, we execute the closure itself. This is basically a function signature. So this is to abstract it into a form where we just have to call the function, open the parentheses, write the value of the amount of time we want it delayed, close the parentheses, and then left brace, and we just put whatever code inside the right brace. So we'll execute whatever is inside the braces.
Right brace, new line, new line, new line.
Okay, now this is it for the assets
Save.
.swift.
Show project navigator, project
Another thing we're going to need now